Welcome back, you guys. Kick back and relax as we dive into another episode of Skip to Saturday. Hey, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I know we had a little bit of a break between the last episode and this one. This episode is the second to the last episode in this season. So before I even get into it, I just do want to say that in case you are listening to this episode and you have not listened to the intro and all the episodes in between up until episode 10, I would highly suggest to go back and listen to them because these next two episodes are behind the scenes, and I will piggyback on everything that I had already mentioned and discussed in the previous episode. So this is not a standalone episode, and you will be confused about what I'm talking about, and it's not going to make sense to you. So I would suggest to go back and listen to everything before you tune into this one. So this episode, like I said before, is going to be behind the scenes type of episode. I'm going to be reflecting on everything that we talked about, anything that was missed or I remembered, and I didn't add it into the episode. I will bring that up here, or if it was removed during the edit, I will bring that back here and share it with you guys. It's going to be more casual, so let's get into it. Basically, when I started Skip to Saturday, so this is back in August, September, that's when I had the thought of doing a podcast. But I will rewind back to 5 to 6 years before that, and I had this idea to do a podcast with my sister. I had no intentions to do something on my own because I was like, is it going to be interesting? Does anyone want to listen to my voice? And what I have to say, is that going to be compelling? You know, I don't want to bore anyone to death. So I wanted to do a podcast with my sister because even though we have the same outlook on life, we do have a lot of difference in opinions and some things we view very differently. But for the most part, we do think very alike. And it's just fun to do it with someone that you vibe with. Like a podcast with is much more fun, I feel like, when there's two people instead of one person talking to themselves in a way. So at that time, 5, 6 years ago, we talked about it, but it wasn't a serious conversation, you know? It was nice to like bounce ideas about what it would look like and what we want to talk about. But it wasn't serious enough that we actually took action. I also was writing my books and my scripts at that time, so it was not a priority. But the idea of doing a podcast with my sister was something that I really wanted to do. And by the way, I am just recovering from a cold or a flu, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but it has hit me like a ton of bricks. So I'm still recovering, and that's why I sound this way. I apologize for that. So fast forward to last August, September, I had the thought of doing a podcast, and I brought it up to my sister, and she has her hands full at the moment. So she could not be committed to it. And with a podcast, you need to have commitment. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this on my own, but it's a thought that stuck with me. And for me, if something sticks and it just won't like get out of my mind, I feel like it's the universe's way of saying like, you need to do this. So it was just there, and I just couldn't let it go. And I was like, maybe this is something that I need to do. And it made me nervous because like I said, I did not want to do this on my own, but I didn't have a choice because I knew my sister couldn't be fully committed to it. And there was no one else that I wanted to do this podcast with. So basically, it just was going to be me. So once I decided that I was going to do it, I just started making a list of names, the topics that I could talk about, that I was comfortable talking about, and the things that I was going to stay away from, which were religion, politics, and sports, because I think with sports, for one, I'm more than happy to sit and watch a game, but I don't know much about sports. Like I can't tell you someone's stats or, you know, how long they've been in this team for and how long they've had this career for. You know, I can't, or their injuries or anything like that, or what contract they signed and who they signed it with, you know? So I couldn't tell you any of that. And I was like, yeah, so no sports. Religion is a topic that can get people riled up, and I was just like, I'm going to stay away from it as much as possible unless I need to make a reference. Then I will use that, but I'm not going to talk about religion and politics. Again, I don't know much about politics. I will read the news. I know what's happening, but not enough to be like, okay, let's dedicate a whole episode to something that's just happened. So those were the three things that I knew I was going to stay away from. And then I had a list of the stuff that I was more than happy to talk about. Then I started brainstorming names for the podcast, and I have this huge list, and I had my friend and my sister help me narrow it down. And Skip to Saturday, the way that came to be the one that really stuck with me was because Saturday for me as a kid, I really enjoyed waking up on a Saturday morning because it felt like the world was my oyster in a way. Like I felt so free because there's Sunday and I could do whatever I need to do on a Sunday, but Saturday, it just felt like I got this break from the 5-day school week, and then I still have another day where I could catch up on the stuff that I need to do, right? So Saturday for me was like TV, playing with Barbies, whatever it was. Like, I could do either everything or nothing. And even as an adult, for Saturdays for me, it still feels like this beautiful day. And I think the best way to put it is like, it just gives you that time to breathe in a way. And sometimes it can be really lazy, sometimes it can be really productive, sometimes it can be really hectic. But it's just for me, Saturday gives me this warmth type of feeling. And I wanted that to reflect in the title. So I know not a lot of people are going to feel that way about Saturday, but that's how I see Saturday. And Skip to Saturday, for me, I'm always looking forward to Saturdays. Like I know for everyone says TGIF, right? Thank God it's Friday. But you still have to wake up in the morning and go to work on a Friday or go to school. Whereas on a Saturday, you don't have any of that for the most part. So that's why Skip to Saturday was the title that really stuck with me, and I thought it was really beautiful. So that's how I decided on the title. It was one of like probably 100. And I wanted the cover art for the podcast to be really colorful because if you know me on a personal level, even if you follow me on Instagram, for the most part, I wear a lot of black. And I wanted my podcast to not be black. I like black or white. I did not want that. I wanted to incorporate a lot of color. And I couldn't find the best way to do it. The only way I could, or that the way I saw it was like, okay, I can add color to the word Saturday. Like every season, Saturday will change in color. So I was testing out different colors. Blue and yellow looked really, really beautiful, but it also didn't look serious. And it looked more like cartoonish. If you look at the font, the color it didn't go well with the font, and it just didn't. It popped, but not in the way that I wanted it to. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to do color if it's something that I'm not 100% happy with, and I wasn't. So I defaulted on doing black, beige, and gray and white, and that's what it is right now. I do plan on changing it for season 2, and I won't say what it's gonna look like, but I do plan on doing that, making that change. So we shall see how that looks like when that happens. But because I didn't have color on the cover art as I wanted to, I decided that the post for the podcast, if you're following my Instagram account, Skip to Saturday, which you should, because everything's related to that podcast is there. I have done a pink theme for season 1. So that's how I've incorporated color into the podcast. It might not be a huge deal, but for me, I'm just like, you know what? I need to bring more color into my life. And the way to do that is to have posts that are more colorful. And then I decided that for each season, I'm going to do a separate color. So season 1 was pink, as you can see. And then season 2 will be its own color. I won't reveal that, but I do know what it is. So that's how that came to me, and that's why all my posts are pink, if you're wondering, because I'm pretty sure people were thinking like, why is everything so pink? It's so girly. I think someone asked me like, is it a girly podcast? And I'm not sure if they said that because they saw my post and just assumed that like it's pink, she's gonna be talking about girly things. But no, every season is gonna have its own color scheme. So now you know why I did that. So my intention was to release this podcast in the beginning of 2025, so in January. And August, September is when I finalized a name and came up with the list of things I could talk about. And I hadn't even started recording until December. And I was supposed to start recording in October. And even before that, actually, because I remember thinking, like, I have the entire month of October to do all these episodes and I'll be set to edit them. And by the end of December, I'll be good to go. And then I'll schedule them out. And then in January, the first episode, the intro, would be released. And I don't have to have the stress of like recording an episode every week and editing it and then releasing it in the span of like 4 or 5 days, you know? However, laziness got the best of me, and that's exactly what happened. The episodes with the guests were pre-recorded before January, except for one. The episode with Baljeet Singh, where we talked about men's mental health, that was recorded in January. But the other two episodes with my dad and Nikki Walton, they were recorded before then. I also want to mention that I had no intention of having guests on my podcast because I didn't know who I wanted and what we would talk about. And everyone has their own area of expertise, right? So no one was coming to my mind, but the first person that did eventually was Nikki Walton, and we talked about love in the first episode. So that was not my intention to have guests, but it definitely is something that I look forward to now because the conversations are much more interesting because you get someone else's perspective on that topic and you get to have that discussion instead of like me sitting here in front of my computer and just talking. And the one thing that didn't cross my mind at first, and it only occurred to me when I did the second episode, was that I am putting myself out there and I'm sharing parts of myself that I don't normally, share on social media. If you follow me on social media, you know that I'm very minimal with like context. Like if I put a picture up, I'm not going to go into detail about where I was or how I felt or what we did that day. I'm not like that on social media, whereas some people are. And so for me to engage with my listeners and help them relate in a way, I have to be more open and vulnerable. And that was hard for me to do. And it didn't cross my mind at the time that I'm going to have to do that. And I don't know why, but it definitely did not cross my mind. And then when I had to share stuff that I didn't openly talk about, it was really nerve-wracking. Like I got really anxious. I would start to sweat as I was recording because I just kept thinking like, oh my God, what are people going to think? And what are they going to say? And with the Punjabi community, you get one person who is interested in your life, but they don't like you, and they hear something and they're going to spread it like wildfire. And it's like, then that can turn into a rumor if someone gets a whiff of it and starts their own little narrative based on the fact that was actually presented in the podcast. So I was thinking about that as well. People are going to hear something and they're going to make their own narrative about whatever I said because maybe I didn't give the full context of what I was talking about, and then it's going to spread. And that's how you get a hold of misinformation. You hear one thing and then someone adds to it with their own thinking or assumption. And then it just, at the end of it, by the time it gets to the 10th person, it's totally different from what it started out with. So I was afraid of that. And I had to tell myself, like, you know what? If you decided to do a podcast and you're going to talk about these things, you have to be honest. You have to be authentic because that's the only way people are going to relate to you. And that's the only way you can succeed if that's what you want. So that was hard for me to do. And another thing that I realized as I was recording some of these episodes or when I was writing down my notes is that there's a lot of stuff that I either forgot or I blocked out because it was just too much for me to handle. And it's something that I didn't want to revisit. But because I was doing the podcast on that particular thing, I had to revisit that. And that was also filled with so much anxiety because, again, now you guys are going to be listening to that and there's going to be that room for judgment because I am voluntarily putting myself out there and you guys have every right to feel the way you feel. You know, I can't tell you not to think this about me or say this about me, but you have every right to look at me in the way that you see is fit. So that was also hard for me. So for the intro, here's a fun fact about that. It's a 2-minute podcast episode, right? However, I had to record that episode 200 times, if not more, because sometimes I was messing up the words. I was reading off of a script at some point. I just wanted it to be perfect, and every time something went wrong. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, if I can't even record a 2-minute episode, how am I gonna do a full episode? Because every episode that I was gonna do on my own was gonna be between 20 to 30 minutes. That was the plan. And then for guests, I had a maximum of 60 minutes. So I was like, how am I supposed to sit here and talk about something for 20 to 30 minutes when I can't even make a 2-minute episode? And I was like, holy shit, like I'm fucked. There's no way this is gonna happen. And I've already announced to everyone on my Instagram that I'm doing a podcast. And I'm the type of person that, like, if I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. Like, I'm not going to back down from it. And maybe there's probably ego in that. So I had to force myself to finally get myself to record an intro that I was happy with. And it just took forever for me to get there. And I remember when I listened to it, the one that I was happy with, when I listened to it, I was like, why do I sound like this? And I had my sister listen to it. She was like, why do you sound so monotone? And I was like, okay, so it's not just me. Like, I do sound monotone. And then I had to, like, work on my speaking and the tone and the wavelength of my voice. Like, I had to, like, I had to put emphasis on some words and not on some. I was like, oh God, like, it sounds like an easy thing, but again, like, I did not want to bore anyone. And if my voice sounded boring, or if I sounded bored with what I was saying, there's no way that you guys were going to find it interesting. So I had to change that. So it took me a few tries after that episode that I thought was going to be the one that I released to do the last recording, the one that was actually published, in a way that I was happy with, and there was life in it, I guess you could say. And then I remember when I had uploaded it, I published it, but I forgot to distribute it. And the day the intro was released, my friend was like, "Where is it? I can't find it." And I was like, "What? There's no way. Like, how can you not find it?" And I went back into my account and I saw the episode was uploaded and I was like, why is it not there? Like, did I miss something? And then I realized that you're supposed to click distribute to every platform that you want your podcast on. And I didn't do that part. So it was there, it was published, but it didn't go out to anywhere because I hadn't selected the platforms that I wanted my podcast to be on. And I was like, oh my God. So that was stupid. For Apple, that I think about 24 hours it takes for you to even get your podcast approved. So I don't know if for me personally, like every podcast is gonna be different. And maybe because the length of it was like only 2 minutes. I think it happened, the approval was like within 24 hours. And I think Spotify was immediately, I think. And YouTube was immediate. And some of the other platforms, it was going to take a little while. So I was like, holy shit, like, I wish I had known this before. And then also, I didn't do enough research when I was, setting up my podcast. I really thought that, like, once you hit publish, it goes out everywhere. But no, you have to select the platforms that you want your podcast to be on. So that was embarrassing. In the first episode, right, the Love That with Nikki Walton, I wasn't even going to do a video because originally I planned on just doing audio. I was like, I'm not comfortable with my face on video. And there's a reason behind that. Because one, I'm really critical of how I look. And I will find little things to nitpick. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't like the way I look here. I don't like the way my mouth is open for too long here. I was just like, instead of having to like, analyze everything in video and make sure that like it looks perfect, and it will take a while, right? It's going to be a lot of editing and maybe redoing the video. I'm better off just doing an audio. And then when I got on to record the episode with Nikki, I told her that I was going to turn off my video for that episode and I'm not doing video at all. And she laughed because she thought I was joking. And I was like, no, I'm really going to turn it off. And she's like, oh, you're serious? And she was like, why? And I told her, like, I don't feel comfortable. And then she gave me the confidence to do video because I had not planned on doing it. She was like, you look perfectly fine. We can reschedule this episode if you want to, but you need to do video. And she was like, I'm not going to force you to do it, but I'm telling you because I've been in the game for 4 years and people want to see the person behind the mic and they want to see your body language and your facial expressions when you're talking. And I was like, damn it, because I really thought I could get away with just doing audio. So I had to like muster up the courage and record that video. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to put this out there because that was not the plan. So we recorded that episode and I decided that I'm not going to publish the entire episode, but I will do bits and pieces of that episode and upload it as like a trailer on my Instagram and YouTube. I haven't done it on YouTube yet, but on Instagram with the guests, you will see little clips. I will upload clips of the rest of the episodes, which I haven't done yet, but I will do that later. I found my middle ground, you know, between like seeing myself for 60 minutes versus like 60 seconds. I'm happy with the 60 seconds versus, you know, watching myself back for 60 minutes. And I remember like one time this guy that I knew really well, and this is like back in my early 20s, he's younger than I was, but not by too far. Like I think we were like 2 years apart. And what he said to me really stuck. And it's one thing when you're critical of yourself. It's another thing when someone says something to you that you didn't even notice about yourself. And now it's in the back of your mind, right? So basically what he said was that you chew like a cow. And that always stuck with me because I didn't think I chewed like a cow, and nor do I watch myself eat. So I didn't know what I looked like when I was eating or chewing. And I was like, holy shit, like that's rude. I think I laughed it off, but it made me feel really bad about myself. And so like that along with like my own criticism just made me not want to do a video. And I applaud those people who can sit in front of a camera and just talk and not care about how they look, because like I will analyze everything. Like, you know, why were my lips not closed? Or why was I looking this way? Or why did I blink too hard? Or why does my eyebrow not look equal to the other one? It's all these little things that I know don't matter, but I need to work on that. So I had no intentions of doing video, but Nikki Walton, shout out to her. She's the one who convinced me to do it because she was like, they're gonna want to see who is behind that mic. They want to put a face to a voice. And I also came across this study like not too long ago about how video podcasts are not going to take over audio, but they're going to become as popular. They're getting there. So it's the time. If you haven't started making video podcasts, it's definitely the time to do that. And I was just like, damn it, like, you know, I really want this podcast to succeed. So I'm going to do whatever I can to make that happen. There was a quote that never made it into that episode with Nikki Walton. So I'm going to share it with you guys now. Don't settle for eating crumbs on the floor. The Father has prepared a place at the table for you. The journey from the floor to being seated at the table is an internal one. It requires an identity adjustment. The Father wants to refine the way you see yourself. You are worth having far more than crumbs. You are worth being seated with Him. For me, this quote, what it tells me is that the love that you get from your higher power, God, the universe, is unlike any other love you'll ever experience. And it's something that I forget a lot. But this quote was a good reminder that whatever He has in store for you will be for your highest good, and you have to change the way you see yourself first before you can realize that. And I thought that was really beautiful. In the second episode, Fear and Passion, Knowing When to Move On, I remember someone said that when we were starting this business, that someone said, a family friend of ours said that a girl has no business running her own company, because basically if a woman is starting her own company, that is delaying the process of starting a family, which is more important. And it was also implied that having a company was a man's job. And I was like, what the hell? I never really thought of it that way. And I started to think, like, am I doing something wrong here? Like, am I not supposed to be doing this? And I remember feeling so anxious when I heard that because I felt like I was being judged for starting a company, which I thought would have been something that people applauded, but it was really looked down upon, honestly. So I didn't mention this in this episode, but when I started A class, I had just graduated from college, right? I wasn't working. I started working in September or October, one of those months. So from January until then, I was free. I was working on A class, right? And then I got a job as an ABA therapist, and I was working on A class then. And then I got a job as an assistant manager, where I was working between 45 to 55 hours per week. It was insane. And I was running A class, trying to get it off the ground. I was writing Storm. That was my first novel. And I was just juggling all of that. And I remember there was times when I barely got any sleep. There was a lot of tears for sure. And it was, a time in my life that has definitely molded me into who I am now. Like, I've built up a lot of resilience. It made me really tough and soft at the same time. I don't know how that happened, but that's who I am today. And I love it. It's really beautiful because I was definitely a soft person before I started A class. When I started A class with my sister, I had to toughen up because it requires so much of you. Like, you have to put on so many different hats. You have to be a different person because you have to show up professionally. You have to show up as a woman who knows what she's doing, because you don't want anyone to take advantage of you. And so, like, I had to become really stern and use my voice. And I have been able to apply it in my life every single day. And sometimes I fall short, I really do. But I've become a much better woman because of that time in my life. So I think that was a pivotal moment for me, I would say. I know that there was another pivotal moment in my late 20s, but in my early 20s, the A class was what really set me apart from who I was and who I wanted to be. So that experience taught me that you have to do what you want to do and you have to go after your dreams and pursue your passions. And you will learn so much about yourself and the industry when you build something from scratch. So if you have a dream, right, and you want to do something on your own, whatever that looks like, do not let fear get in the way. Whether or not it works out for you, you are going to change as a person into a much better version of you. And it will happen so quickly. And it's something that you'll be forever thankful for. Like, I can guarantee you that you're not going to look back at that moment in your life, if it didn't work out, regretting that. I think the only time you probably will regret something if you tried and it failed is if you put a lot of your own money into it and you've lost it all. That I can see how someone can regret it. But if that's not the case, then you will not regret starting something even if it failed. If it succeeds, then that's amazing. That's amazing. Kudos to you, right? But I feel like if you are a person who wants to start something from scratch, has an idea, is passionate about something, and you want to offer it to the world, go do it. Don't wait. That's my advice to you. In episode 3, Love's Little Black Book, there's a quote that I'm pretty sure I didn't add into that episode. And basically what it said was, whatever you tolerate while dating will multiply 10 times in marriage. Marriage doesn't fix dysfunction, it reveals it. Don't marry potential, marry reality. I think it's really important not to marry potential, and you have to marry the reality, because what if this doesn't change? What if this person that you're with, they never change? And are you going to be happy with that? I know realistically people do change and evolve to an extent, but let's just say that this is it. Are you happy with that? And because a lot of people marry for potential, they see that, oh, this person can do these things, or I can build them up to this. And they're banking on that happening. And when it doesn't happen, they get so disappointed with that person and they feel like that person let them down. But in reality, you created this version of them that didn't exist and they weren't meant to be that person. So you let yourself down by having this false perception of what your life could look like. So I think, like, it's a good way to look at it. And I remember, like, when people kept asking me about marriage, I would get so much anxiety because I started to think that if I hadn't found my person in my 20s, or if it didn't happen, if I didn't get married in my 20s, then it was never going to happen. But what I learned is that you can't put a timeline on these things. And that episode really made me reflect on how I went against my gut instinct. And even after that, like that was 22, 23, I want to say. Up until like in the last 2 years, I have not really listened to my gut instinct for the most part. There have been times when I have, but for the most part, like I will go against it and I'll do what I feel like should do. Then I'll realize that I shouldn't have done that. I actually should have listened to my gut. In the last 2 years, I've really, tried to focus on what my inner self is telling me because I know that I've never regretted listening to that. So I'm working on that. But that episode made me really reflect on how in that moment when I gave that person a chance, my gut was telling me, like it was screaming like this is not gonna work for you. Don't even go down this route. But I didn't listen. And that episode was really hard for me because I had to talk about something that I was not comfortable talking about, but it had to be shared. I want other people to know that, like, if you feel like something's off, if you feel like this is not for you, you need to voice that. You can't keep it quiet just to keep everyone else happy and pleased. I remember, like, when I was recording that episode, my heart started to sink and I felt like I was drowning because I was reliving that moment in my life. And I was afraid that, like, people were going to judge me for giving someone a chance when I didn't want to give them a chance. And when I said that, like, my gut was telling me no, someone was going to come back and be like, well, then why did you go against it? Like, why? You're a grown adult, you're in your 20s, you don't have to listen to what everyone else is saying. Like, why? So, why did you do that? Why did you subject yourself to that torture? And that, when I was thinking about that, as I was recording, even when I was editing, it made me sad. It made me really, really sad because I allowed that to happen. And it was also like a good reminder that, like, if you don't want this to happen to you again, you have to really listen to what your gut is telling you. And when you're looking for your person, one thing that you should remember is that that person should elevate you. They should make you want to do better and be better overall. I know some women who just admire their partners and they see qualities in them that they either lack or wish that they had. So they complement one another. And I think that's so important. That's something that I didn't mention in the episode. And marriage should not be treated like an item on your checklist that you just check off. And that was what it was like for me back then. In my 20s, it was just like, okay, go to school, find someone, get married, have kids. I just need to check everything off and then I'm done. But there's more to life than that. But at that time, I wasn't looking at it that way. And I know in the Punjabi community, it's definitely treated that way. Like it's an item on a grocery list that you just need to check off. And then that's it. Once you've done that and you've had your kids, you're set and you're good. That's it. That's all you need out of life. And God forbid you don't want to get married. Like that's a whole other conversation. It makes me really wonder how many people have gotten married due to the pressure of the questions being asked over and over again. Like, why don't you want to get married? When are you going to get married? Right? But they really truly never want to be married. Like, I wonder how many people are in marriages like that. And in that episode, I realized that I did not use my own mind for a really long time. Or at least if I did, and if someone said something that was the opposite of what I was thinking or feeling, that had a huge impact on me. My 20s was definitely like a roller coaster of emotions, I feel like. And one other thing that I didn't mention in that episode was that, like, when people were, trying to set me up with someone and they were the elders, the one thing that I did not say was that, and it's something that people are probably going to disagree with, but listening to your elders is not always good advice. And I'm going to explain to you why. And the key word here is always. And I'm not saying that you need to disrespect your elders, but being older doesn't mean that you're wiser. Okay, that's number one. Sometimes the advice that our elders offer us is like, it comes from outdated thinking or it's rooted in fear and regret. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people age, but they never grow, right? So I would be open to taking advice from those who have lived their life on their own terms and they've made the mistakes and they can offer you like a good perspective on whatever the situation is because they went down their own road, they learned from their own mistakes, whereas some people who were told to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they've done all of that, and they didn't go off the road, they don't have a lot to offer unless they have learned a lot and they're reflecting and they would advise people to do things differently. Because some people will not admit that the choices that they made based on what other people are telling them was not good for them. Because they don't want to hear that, like, well, you should have not listened to them, or you should have made your own decisions because you were grown enough to do that, you know? Sometimes we're not comfortable with hearing that, like, it's on us. And you know how I said that older doesn't always mean wiser? Wisdom isn't guaranteed with age. You know, it comes from growth, self-awareness, embracing new experiences, and having the courage to evolve. And I don't think a lot of people can say that they've done that. So when elders tell you that this guy or this girl is good for you, I think it's probably best to look at their life and see how they grew up, what their mentality is like about the future, and how kids should be raised and how people should be living their life, you know? Because that will give you an idea of, oh, is this person a good sounding board? Or is this person telling you what they've been taught their entire life and they haven't grown or evolved and they just have the same thinking that they had 20 years ago? You know, there's a huge difference because some people do grow and evolve and they'll give you a different advice. And there's some people who do not and they're going to give you different advice. So I would definitely look at the person, their life choices, how their life turned out, what their past was like, you know, what their upbringing was like, and base your, base your judgment on whether or not that person is a person that who's going to offer you good advice when it comes to marriage or anything else for that matter. Actually, there's another quote that I had, but it didn't make the cut. It said that some people awaken the fighter in you, others call forth the lover. Choose the ones who soften your guard, who remind your inner it's safe to rest. Be with those who make room for your tenderness, who don't mistake your softness for weakness. Life is too short to spend in relationships that keep your nervous system on edge. Make peace a priority. Yeah, so for episode 3, Love's Little Black Book, that should be a priority, your peace. And I think that's really important when it comes to finding someone that, you know, you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Do they bring you peace? There's a lot of other things you have to look at, but yeah, like at the end of the day, like I want to be at peace with the person that I'm with. In episode 4, Cabo Diaries, I don't have much to say about that other than the fact that like it was the only time I felt like I was actually living when I went there. You know, I soaked in everything and I was present. And I'm not saying that I wasn't present in any of my other trips, but that was the only time when I was actually soaking every little thing. And maybe because it was a last minute trip, maybe that played a part in that. And it didn't allow me to have like time to jam pack my trip with a whole bunch of other stuff. But it was definitely such a beautiful trip. And I still think about it today, you know? I'm really hoping that I get to go to Cabo at some point or somewhere where I disconnect and I'm able to like be there and be present and soak everything in. In episode 5, that's where we talk about men's mental health with Baljeet Singh. I remember listening to that episode when I was editing it. I heard my voice and I was like, oh my God, why do I sound so sad? You know, it took me a while to figure it out, but the reason why my voice sounded like that, I don't know if you guys could tell, but it's because that recording was done in the morning because of the time difference. He's in the UK, right? So it was like 5 o'clock for him and it was like 9 o'clock for me. And I hadn't spoken to anyone before then. So that was my morning voice. And I totally forgot when I was editing it. And I was just like taken aback by why I sounded so sad. And I was just like, wait, I wasn't sad. It's just, that's how I sound in the morning. That made me crack up a little bit. That episode also was an emotional one, but I had to hold back in my tears. I did cry afterwards, but towards the end of it, like when I'm wrapping up the episode, my voice was on the verge of breaking. And it's because at that time, I don't know if you guys noticed that, but if you did, it's because I started to remember someone who was struggling during that time as I was editing and how like helpless it made me feel. And then I just knew that the only thing I could do for him was to offer him love and give him the support that he needed. And so when I was wrapping up that episode and I was reminding the listeners that they're important and that they're, you know, that their life is valuable, I connected it to him. And it made me really, really sad. So I don't know if you guys noticed the change in tone of my voice, but if you did, that's because I almost started crying. And leading up to that episode, you guys remember that the reason why I did that episode is because I lost my grandfather to suicide, right? So that was the whole reason why I wanted to bring awareness, because I've lost someone to that. And I never really thought about how my dad coped with it. I was 16 at that time, so he wasn't like my priority of like, oh, are you okay? I was worrying about myself and thinking about my own feelings and how I was gonna deal with everything, and how I lost someone that I really, really adored and loved being around. So it never occurred to me that like my dad lost his dad. And so I asked him, I was like, how did you cope with it? And he said that, you think back and you wish you had done more or been there more. He did go and to see my grandpa when he was in the psych ward. And I think it was about like a month, I want to say. I think he was working from the UK, so he wasn't on vacation, but he took work with him so he could be there for longer. And yeah, so he was there with his dad. He said that you think about how you could do things differently. Obviously you can't change the past, but that's what goes through your mind. So I think that's it for today. I will pick up where I left off in the next episode. So I will cover episode 6 onwards. We did intro and episode 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I do want to say that, like, reflecting back on the entire season, it has been really heavy reliving some of this stuff because, I don't sit and think about it often. So, because I was forced to do that for the episodes, it was really heavy, and I did not expect that. That was a shocking thing for me because I thought it was gonna be something I just talk about and then, be done with it and end the episode and then you move on. But I really got to thinking, and it was intense for me. And the one thing I do regret, and I don't live with a lot of regrets, but the one thing I do regret is that in my 20s, I put myself through a lot of stress or either allowed it, and I wish I hadn't done that. But I'm finally at a place in my life where I'm genuinely embracing the present moment. I'm not thinking about what's next. I'm not worried about when is this gonna happen? When am I gonna reach this milestone? I realized that I did that too much, putting so much focus on having a timeline and then not meeting that timeline. And a lot of time has flown by. Life has gone by so quickly. And I don't want to spend another day worrying about when are certain things are going to happen for me. So I'm living in the moment and I'm appreciating all that I have. And I hope that you guys are able to get there as well. And I admire the people who do that, because life goes by so quickly. It really, really does. So that's it for today. Like I said, we'll pick up where we left off in the next episode. And until then, I hope you guys have a lovely day ahead of you. Keep yourselves hydrated. Summer's around the corner. Try not to get sick, but if you do, take care of yourself, get some rest. I'm being a hypocrite because I'm not resting and I should be. So I will try to do that more this week. Be happy, enjoy your day, have fun, and I'll see you guys next week.